Hello, hello, welcome back. It's been a little while since we've done a webinar, but holidays and Easter and the likes get in the way. So we're back on the webinar wheel, and hopefully we will be in the coming weeks. We've got a few interesting ones coming up in the pipeline and more to come later on in the year. But that's enough of that. Let's talk about what we're going to discuss today, and that's women in construction, which is a hot topic, if you like. We have Women in Construction Week, and it's in that whole diversity kind of category. But I think one thing I'd like to talk about today before I introduce the panelists is more of a rounded view. We'll dig into some particular topics, and I want this to be slightly different to what you might have heard previously. And we'll get some from dialogue from our panelists on what they think about particular topics and particular questions, which I'll pose to them. So without further ado, this isn't about me, it isn't about the BBA, it's about you, the people that are watching and listening, and it's about our two panelists, which I'm going to hand over to both of them to introduce themselves. First of all, we've got, who should we start with? Let's start with, I can't say ladies first, can I? And that's probably terrible from a women in construction webinar, but I'm going to go for Anna Scothern, Chief Executive of the NHIC. Anna, can you do a better introduction to yourself than I've just done, please?
Oh, well, it's the National Home Improvement Council. You're right, I'm Anna Scothern. I've been Chief Exec with the NHIC, gosh, since 2016 now, which seems like no time at all, but also a huge amount of time. And I'm coming up, although obviously I don't look it, I'm coming up to my quarter centenary of working in the construction industry. Wow. So my whole career has been in construction right from graduating. So that's a little intro to me.
Wow, fab. I thought you were going to say, and I've just had my 25th birthday, which, you know, that would have been completely plausible as well. Either or. Fantastic. Excellent. Warm them up. Okay, let's move on to our next panelist. Delighted to introduce Katy Roberts, Head of Marketing at the BBA. Katy, over to you.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, so as Pete says, I head up the marketing team at the BBA, and I'm actually, unlike Anna, I'm quite a newbie to the construction world. My background has always been technology, digital, telematics, and I moved into the construction world about just over 2 years ago now when I took up the post permanently at the BBA. I'm a marketer by nature, touched on all kinds of things, looked at key account, user demand generators, and everybody in the mix. And I think my background has always been around how to bring communities together to engage and to communicate better for the greater good of the industry they exist within. So it's been very interesting. I'm sure this chat is also going to allow me to share some insights that I've kind of learned in this crossover step that I've taken. So really happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Pete.
Yeah, fantastic, absolute pleasure. Delighted to have both of you on board today. So we'll be talking for about 25 minutes on various topics about women in construction. First of all, I'd like to set the scene a little bit, and Anna, I'm going to come to you first. Could you tell everyone listening how you ended up working within the construction industry 25 years ago?
Completely by accident. Although I'm third generation new house builder, so it's quite poetic really that I've ended up in housing, but it certainly wasn't by intention. I didn't know what to do at university, so I did my favorite A-level, which turned out to be my worst A-level score, and did 5 years at university reading chemistry, and it was very hard. And it's a good job I found it enjoyable, because I found it extremely tough. But what that did as well, I worked a placement in the Northeast with ICI as a process scientist, and that helped me realize what I didn't like doing. So I didn't like being a scientist. I loved chemistry, but I didn't want to work in a lab. And back in the day, this was the 90s, mid to late 90s, and it was a time when there were lots more jobs around. And so I'd been offered jobs for British Sugar and also for British Steel, both as process scientist, both of which I didn't want to do. And at the time I worked in a pub in the holidays, my local pub, and one of the chaps sat drinking a pint at night. So what are you doing when you finish in uni? Don't know. I've got these 2 jobs. Don't know. And he worked for RMC, which at the time was the world's largest cement, concrete and aggregate manufacturer and quarrier producer. And he was the divisional director for the Midlands. I'm from the Midlands. And he says, oh, I'm sure that there's a job that you'd be brilliant at. And it was down at RMC's head office doing technical training. So my first ever job out of uni, and I went and did interviews and went through all their program and all that sort of stuff, out of uni was as a technical trainer for cement, concrete and aggregates.
Wow.
So it wasn't in any way a sexy job. It was a bit of a conversation stopper, I'll be honest. But it was in London, close to London, Staines-Thorpe. And I lived in London. I lived in Twickenham. And of course, then I got into rowing, and I was, everyone was like, you work for this amazing company. Well, if you knew anything about construction, I did, but not if you didn't. And so that's how I got into it. And I got in on the materials side, very much on the technical side, then went into the marketing and communications. So did a lot of performance marketing. So it was the time, when we were selling on performance benefits of products rather than just what was in it. So led a lot of stuff on that, and then ended up very much getting into performance of concrete as a material. So acoustics, fire performance, thermal performance, that led you into sustainability, and eventually ended up in housing and existing stock and being group director for BRE. And then over onto the NHIC. So it's generally in my career, it's been what I don't like doing has ended up leading me to what I do like doing.
In a nutshell, you're kind of the perfect spokesperson to speak about the construction industry in general and the various types of roles that are within, rather than the traditional construction, which we always hear about, which is, bricks and block and building. But the various roles you've had there, it highlights the variety that's available within construction.
For sure. And I did hit some, I used to go out on site a lot, and you've got to wear your RMC tie, because back then there was a culture of having, your company tie and what have you. And so it's like, well, what's Anna going to wear? We don't have any. So we ended up having, but I have to say, it was never genuinely has never been a problem. If anything, because there were so few women, and I interviewed as part of International Women's Day. We did it all through the month of March, and all the women I interviewed said the same thing, that actually, because there were so few women, in some ways it became advantageous because you were more memorable, and it wasn't necessarily as problematic as one might think the past was.
Okay, that's really interesting. That's we might come back on to that. So Katy, let's move on to yourself. I know you haven't had 25 years experience in the industry, but tell us how you ended up working within construction.
So I've always been in marketing, and at one stage I was working as a freelance marketer, having left the tech world and the digital world. I kind of wanted to downscale and just really identify where my next role was going to be, what my place in the world was going to be. And I've always been, as I say, involved in some way with communities. And it was actually a serendipitous meeting which led me to the BBA. And I started doing a little bit of work, and then they said, "Can you stay a little bit longer? Can you actually just stay?" And it was an exciting time to join the business, because the industry was changing, the business is changing. There was a lot to be done. I'm a natural fixer by nature, so there was a lot to be done and really get my teeth sunk into. And something that I really I've spent a lot of time in various industries, and many of them have been new. And one thing that I never take for granted is, I think when you move into something new, you take, and I'm just noticing my camera's going really dark, so apologies. I think it's the light that's being caught. One thing that I've always noticed, when you move into something new, you probably take a little bit more time actually studying and understanding what you're getting into. So what makes it tick? What are the pain points? Where is it sluggish? That kind of thing. And the stereotypical stories existed, when I moved into the construction world around the fewer females, and you expect everyone's going to don a hard hat and steel toe cap boots and high vis, and yet what I was surprised by was the evolution of roles that are happening within the industry, which demands skill regardless of gender or background or ability. And that to me was quite encouraging, because I think I was able to bring skills across from an industry which is more advanced or progressed, if you will, in terms of digitization, to a space which is kind of looking at how we can get onto this. We all know we need to change, so it was quite a nice movement to be able to bring some of those skills across. If you look back at history and women in construction, they've always been there in some shape or form. I think I was reading a really interesting article about women dating back to, I think the earliest records of where women were working as construction workers dates back to the 13th century in Europe. And then, it's because it was socially unacceptable to kind of have women working in these traditionally non-domestic roles. They weren't recorded, but it's not to say that they weren't there, so it was really encouraging that it's not a new thing. Women have always been, you look at the massive economic booms over the years and how things have changed, and women just get stuck in the wars, women got stuck in, and that was encouraging to see that it's not something new, but that women have always kind of been there. The presence just hasn't been as strong, or the recognition hasn't been as strong. But that was encouraging for me, and to think, okay, we have the ability to do so much more. So that's kind of what led me to the space I'm in now.
And I think that's really interesting to see that perspective and point of view of it, that women in construction and other industries in general, they've always been there. There's always been women in construction, and at some point it's almost like Women in Construction Week. To some, it might be construed as, well, there isn't any, so we need women in construction, whereas it isn't that. It's highlighting that, look, we need to promote these things because we need diversity in the workplace. We need more women in construction because of the good work that's previously happened when they've been involved in things. Which goes across the board for diversity, which leads us nicely onto our kind of first main topic, and that's kind of the current state in the industry. So I want to ask Anna first, what are your thoughts on the current industry and the diversity that's within it?
I think it's good. I think it definitely can be better, and that isn't just around getting more women in. I know we're talking about that today, but it's about getting more different mindsets in, because there's loads and loads of research that shows that diverse teams deliver better outputs. So if you've got lots of 40-year-old white men sat round a table creating something, any project, you're gonna get potentially the same type of thinking. Whereas if you've got a lot of 40-year-old white women sat round the table, again, you will get the same type of thinking. So it's about having that diversity of experience, which includes bringing younger people through, but also individuals from ethnic minorities, from different gender biases, from different sexuality biases. So it's about, and I think that the beauty of having focused events around a certain community, whether it be LGBT plus, whether it be ethnic minorities, or whether it be women, it gives everybody an opportunity to pause and think, what are we doing on this? Are we doing enough? What impact did last year's activity have? And is that enough? So that it just allows it to be part of the normal business calendar. And it's led by the likes of Katy and the marketing and the comms people, because they'll be pushing the board to say, we need content to talk about why Black Lives Matter. Are we having an opinion on it? Are we having an opinion on this? Are we publicly going to be doing something around women in construction? Or, you know, it's Pride Month. Are we going to change our banners? So these things start making and forcing corporate conversations, which I think then starts people thinking, well, actually, do we have a gender pay gap? Do we have enough? Are we allowing people to work from home? Are we allowing? So it starts the system changing. And I don't think anybody does. I've never experienced anybody that doesn't want women in construction, but they might inadvertently create a system which makes it really difficult for women to work in that environment. And I think that's possible. I think that's why topics like this and annual events and getting involved in them are powerful, because it starts to normalize the conversations within a corporate environment.
Yeah, I like the fact that it's the start of the conversation, these events. It's not the end of that conversation, you know, it's not the pinnacle, it's just to open that conversation up and make it a more relevant conversation and an easier conversation to start, rather than it being the end of it. Women should be in construction, let's move on. Yeah, it's not that clear cut. Katy, again, I know you haven't been in construction that long, but what are your thoughts on what you've seen so far in terms of diversity?
So I think just to pick up also on what Anna was saying, I think what things like this that are really good is it shows opportunity that exists. To me, I think there's a culture that needs to be changed. You know, and that's what perhaps stops or becomes a hurdle in someone joining anything new. You think, oh, it's probably not for me. You know, I think most of the challenges we face are cultural, built up from years of perceptions and the stereotyping and all that kind of stuff. And I think stuff like this is not, you know, you get the trendsetters and you get the people that are standing out front of the queue, you know, raising a flag, making a difference. But there are others who are just saying, you know, it's a great place to work. You can absolutely have opportunity here, you know, and it's exposing all of that without thinking I've got to be almost like a martyr for the cause. You know, it's a great opportunity to work because there's such a lot of diversity of skill. So I think things that have certainly changed is I think people are becoming more aware of the opportunity within the space. Touching on what Anna has said as well, in terms of, you know, we've got different types of buying styles, different types of decision making. So, you know, we're looking at the younger people that are moving through the ranks that are going to be totally transforming the way construction works through digitization, through the way that they, you know, their level of expectation is so different to what it's been before. You know, something that's more immediate, that they want results now, they work on reviews, as opposed to, you know, it's just a completely different environment. So I think what is changing is we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think it's important for us to spend time talking and listening to all the different, you know, people involved in our space so that we can learn and adapt. Because I think that's the one area where I think our industry might still be slow to adapt, is actually listening and taking on board, you know, and adapting for a different audience.
Okay, cool. I'm going to move the conversation on slightly. I just noticed the time, so I'm just going to move it on because there's some questions that I really want to get to. And the first one of those, I'm going to stick with yourself, Katy, and that is from an outsider of the construction industry, looking to start a career in construction. Do you think it's tricky to get involved in that? Or are we opening it up to make it a lot easier to be part of construction now?
So speaking from my own personal opinion, I found it tricky, only because there was so much I didn't know, and I felt like there were a lot of, you know, big blocks I had to move. I think we've still got a long way to go, and it's probably because I'm coming from a digital technology background where I'm kind of going, I want things to happen smoothly. But certainly, I think when I moved into the space, I didn't move into it because I was driven by the industry. It wasn't something that kind of lit my fire, going, oh my word, I really want to be in this space. space, but it was more because of the opportunity to fix, to support, to grow, regardless of what the industry type was, you know. So I went in almost with a heart to learn about what that is so that I can apply my skill. But I think we need to move past the it's boring, it's unmovable notion. I think, you know, that is something that could be associated with so many other industries, and I can just rattle off in my own mind. You know, it's the construction space is I don't think it's tricky. I think what is not clear is that people don't view it as a space of opportunity, new growth, new development. I mean, there's such an abundance of richness when you look at the innovations coming out within the industry. It's so exciting to be almost at the core of what's going on. You know, you look at mining similarly, you know, it's just one of those things that you think, how on earth is that ever going to progress? But the amount of innovation that's coming out of the space is just so exciting. So I don't think it's any more tricky than many other industries. I just think if you've got the right heart for opportunity and you're willing to make a difference, I think anybody can cross that and move into it, you know, so, and make a real impact. So yeah, I mean, I look at some other women in the field, Anna's one example, but there was another woman I read about, Kelly Vincent, who at 18, she moved into the NHS, was working in NHS administration, and she decided she felt like a change and she became an electrician. And she has gone on to build an amazing trade business. And, you know, it's just surprising people, not because she wants to be this kind of leader, but just because she felt like doing something different. And it's that kind of culture and thought that I think we should be encouraging and nurturing. And it's exciting. It's actually an exciting place to be.
Yeah. So Anna, I want to take you back to that pub. What was the name of the pub you worked in?
The Duke of Wellington.
Right, I want to take you back to the Duke of Wellington, not literally, but, you know, metaphorically. And if you were working there now and you were looking to get into construction, do you think it would be harder now than it was then? Are you seeing anything in terms of women trying to get into construction that makes it seem tricky, or is it much easier now?
I think if you're a woman and you want to get into construction, you'll be welcomed with open arms, because I think a lot of organisations have, rightly or wrongly, quotas that they want to hit. And I know I was speaking with an apprentice manager working in London, and they have been if you want to work in construction at the minute, whatever you are, you'll be welcomed with open arms, because we have massive shortages. You know, it's a fantastic career. Anybody watching this, woman or not, come and work in construction, because if you've got anything about you, you will have an amazing career and you will literally be welcomed with open arms. And certainly in my bit of it, the home improvement bit, you can make a fantastic living in it and do great work that makes a difference to people's lives, to the planet, and your own purse. So I think we have a perception problem. I think the media has a lot to play in that, and I think schools have a lot to play in that. When I was doing my careers advice at 15, I actually wanted to go into engineering, and I was told by my careers advisor that that's not what women do, that I needed to think about being a doctor or a vet instead. And I didn't have enough about me at 15 to really challenge that. I was just like, oh, okay, so I won't do engineering then, you know, and I ended up doing what I've already told you about. But it's not hard to get into construction. It's people don't want to, because they have the wrong idea of what being in construction is, and that's our responsibility to make that change. And I think the media has a role to play in that as well, because whenever people think about construction, they think of bricks on, you know, laying bricks and it being cold and wet, and you know, there is an element of that, but a lot of people love being outside. But the company I was talking about that works in central London, they can't get hold of anybody. They proactively tried to get women into their apprenticeship scheme and didn't get any apply, despite having, you know, trying and trying again. So, you know, I do think there's huge opportunities for any age to come into the sector and to genuinely make a difference and have a positive experience of working.
So just on that quota thing that you mentioned, do you think having a quota as such for a certain demographic is the right way to view it?
No, is my blunt answer. However, I think they have a purpose in you don't know where you are until you start measuring. And why I think people end up sort of saying, let's have a quota, and a lot of organizations do it because they'll think, we want to have 50% representation at board level, let's say. And so then they think, you know, and then you start seeing in job advertisements, you know, applications, welcome from ethnic minorities, because people are trying to encourage people in. And that's why, again, I think things like webinars, chairing events, being visible, it allows other demographic audiences to see it. And there's this belief that if people don't see it, they don't think it's for them. So if we can showcase more voices and more diversity, then I think it allows more people to see it and think, oh, well, she's doing it, so actually maybe it is something I can do. But I think a lot of that, again, falls back to the system. And if it's the same with Parliament, you know, gosh, who'd want to be a politician? You know, you're away from home all week. It's a very macho environment. And actually the system needs to change if you're wanting to get more diverse decision making in that. And construction's very similar. It's the, you know, having to be away from home a lot. We tended much more when I started than we do now, but there tended to be a lot of out of work hours socializing. There's a lot of clubs that people are part of that I don't, you know, like industry type clubs that meet at night once a month in a pub, and nobody ever says it's not for women. It's just that you generally don't get women there because they don't want to be at 9 o'clock till 11 o'clock in a pub somewhere talking about work. And then you also think, well, actually there's a lot of men that don't want to be doing that either. So actually the system, a lot of the system needs to change around it.
Yeah, sure. Just before I ask Katy a similar question, initiatives, you touched upon it before, but initiatives like Women in Construction Week and the likes, is that the right way to highlight the need for diversity? I know you touched upon it a little bit earlier. I'm just wondering if, like we said, that's the start of the conversation, not the be all and end all. Is weeks and things like that the right way to go about it?
Yeah, because I think it provides a pause and it provides a focus to keep coming back to the issue. Are we doing the best for our clients, whomever they are, by having the best decision makers in the room? And it's not always looking in a mirror. You know, it's we have to look more broadly than our own selves to ensure that we do make the best decisions. And that's the same whether it's, you know, HS2, Tideway, a small RMI company going in and doing a conservatory, or, you know, it's about how do we make sure that there is the best people are there doing it.
Okay, cool. So Katy, what do you, just moving on slightly, what do you feel can be done from, we're talking industry wide here, so an industry wide perspective to assist more women into construction? I suppose let's broaden that, not just women in construction, but the right people into construction.
So, you know, we've been running, you know, Pete, we've been running so many discussion forums, webinars, and we've started doing our roundtables this year. And the one thing that, you know, even just speaking to a lot of our clients, the one thing that many tell us is that we are disjointed, we're not joined up. And that is, to me, you know, there is such a hunger to speak together, to work together, to be together in some shape or form, but it's kind of it's still not coming together as much as what we all are desiring it to come together. So to me, there's a bit of a blocker around, as I said before, the culture change, systemic, you know, things that need to change within the space. But I kind of feel like the more we talk to each other and the more we invite each other to speak about issues that are important to us, the more there's room to expose potential change and opportunity for change. I think, you know, it also highlights the construction industry not only as one that requires you to wear, you know, certain gear and be in a certain space, but it's something that is, you know, that is offers so much opportunity, regardless of function or type, you know, or trade even. And that only comes when you start to work together, you speak to each other about it. So I don't think there's a quick fix. It's certainly not something that's going to happen overnight. But I think there is an opportunity about talking less about what's wrong with the industry and more about what's right with it and what we can do together to kind of fix it. So I know I'm speaking quite in the cloud and, you know, ambitious here, but I genuinely think that the more, even just speaking to Anna and listening to her speak now in this forum is already opening my eyes to new things to address and new ways to tackle things. And it's just a simple conversation. If we don't have to do major things. I think with things like weeks, as Anna says, brings great recognition and spotlight on it. But I genuinely think the more we do together to enable this type of conversation, the more we will show that it's a perfectly wonderful space to be in, you know, and a space that really needs great people to revolutionize it, because that's really what we get to. So not an easy one to answer, but I hope it gives you something.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm just conscious of time. I just want to get these 2 questions in because it's looking towards the future, which I think will be massively valuable to get both your inputs on. So as we move forward, I'm going to come to Anna first. When we move forward and looking towards the future, where do you feel the next generation of construction industry workers is going to come from? Is this down to the whole industry collectively, down to individual organisations, down to the individuals being more proactive, associations getting involved, the government schooling? It's probably a whole host of those things, but where is this next generation going to come from?
Well, it's a big challenge, and it's a big challenge that is being looked at around attractiveness of the industry, and we have to work across all of those things, and part of that does start at a governmental level, because we have to work with the Department for Education. We have to get careers advice connected into construction being the breadth of offering within construction, because I mean, even the local comprehensive near me, they do stuff on construction, but they do stuff at the learn how to bricklay end of construction. They don't do digital skills for construction. They don't do accountancy for construction. They don't do, so it's about educating that level of educators and influencers, that actually there's a whole industry, literally we're the 3rd largest industry in the country, where, you know, where there's a whole raft of opportunities that you can do, and you shouldn't we shouldn't sort of head people off very, very early on. And everybody that whenever I do a podcast interview, and we're into the dozens now, and I ask people how did they get into construction, very few come in the traditional way, i.e. I did an engineering degree and I went to work for a big tier 1 contractor. Less than 10% get into us that way. So it's massively open. It's just about people seeing it as, there's an opportunity.
Yeah. Katy, would you agree?
Totally. I was just going to say, I think if you had to ask me the same question, I'd give exactly the same answer. I was speaking to a housing developer who was saying, do you know, that they really struggle with getting good tradespeople into the market, because there is a stigma that they have found attached to, exactly as you say, if you weren't quite academic or you struggled a bit at school, then probably construction, you know, in the old days, construction was the space that would be good for you. And you look at that, the results of that activity and what we're reaping now, you know, it's just I think that is exactly the place that we need to start in terms of re-educating our own, you know, our own system as to what the opportunities are. And I think so there's that bit, but then there's also the, you know, working with showing what's available and looking at the creative side of it, looking at the innovation side. You know, we work with some clients, even at the BBA, who are doing some remarkable things. They're in construction, but they're working with products that you would like. It's just amazing that the stuff that is being done. You don't have to be a bricklayer or you don't have to go into become an architect. There is so much more that involves being in construction. It could relate to, you know, manufacturing and coming up with some amazing new product. There's the whole sustainability angle we haven't even been speaking about. Construction is like this label, but it is a massive subject that I think is often overlooked, because we go to the bricklayer and we go to the electrician and the plumber, and I think that's the one thing that needs massive, you know, revolution or overhauling in terms of what that means. So yeah, 100% agree with that.
And for me, it's very much almost the hard hat imagery. And you type construction into Google, you're almost nailed on that 90% of the images will have a hard hat and it'll be on a construction site. And yes, that is the end product. But there's so much more, like you've both said, that needs to be publicized. It's almost isn't construction in a way. It's just working in that industry. Okay, let's final question, because I know we're way over on time, so apologies. But Katy, what changes do you think we're going to see within the workforce over the coming years?
I definitely think you're going to see a lot more crossover from other industries. So we said at our roundtable earlier this year, we need to be learning from other industries so that we ourselves can advance. So I think there's going to be a lot of crossover in terms of skill. As the industry starts to digitize itself, we're going to, our skill shortage that already exists, I think might even become more of a problem, because people that, haven't traditionally been used to digitizing their process will now need to. So we're going to see a lot of kind of adapting from other industries coming over. I certainly hope that we'll see, the pay gap, which is an issue that is so, it's not just related to the construction space, but so many, that I really hope to see that will just get narrower and narrower, that true recognition will be shown in terms of women in leadership positions, and then I expect to see things like, as we become more accustomed to having all genders, all ability working in the space, silly little things. I say silly little things, but things we often overlook, like I read a stat around that women, there is a higher risk of female injury in the construction space, and that is solely down to poorly fitting equipment. So you think of the equipment that is worn externally, majority of it has been designed for the male figure, right? So like things like that, it's not just about let's get a woman into the leadership team, but it's actually let's transform what we have built for centuries to make it available and accessible to everybody. So I hope to see a lot more of that coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get rid of the ties. Anna had issues with those in the past, and God knows you can't get anywhere if you don't wear a tie these days. Okay, final words, Anna. I'll come to you. What changes do you foresee in the coming years within construction?
Well, I want to sort of flip that around really and say to anybody watching, especially to women watching, the biggest thing that I would say is don't feel as though you have to be like a man, or you have to behave how you think a man would behave in a certain situation. Do you be the best version of you that you can be, because the industry is ready. We want it. We want diversity. We want different thinkers. And so get confidence from who you are, rather than feeling as though you've got to be something else in order to fit. We are, Katy said it right at the start, she's a fixer of things. Construction naturally is a builder of things. We build beautiful things. We build beautiful teams. So be yourself to enable yourself to come through as part of whatever you build while you're in work.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree. Right, okay, that's a great way to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining me. On my screen, I'm in the middle of you two, so rose between two thorns comes to mind, but genuinely, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. We've run over a little bit, but it's just so interesting to hear both of you speak, both passionate, both keen and interested about construction and what you do and the various roles you do. So appreciate you both. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for what you do for the construction industry. Really appreciate it.
And
thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, and we'll see you all later.
Take care.
Bye.